Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Welcome to our Art and Science webinar. My name is Kenya, and I'll be your host as we discuss 7 messaging secrets to help you book more discovery calls. So today's webinar is going to be about 45 minutes or so, and we're going to save the last 10 to 15 minutes for Q&A. So go ahead and use that Q&A button down below to ask questions, and we'll do our best to answer everything we can. And of course, if we don't, we can definitely follow up with you after. And now, without further ado, I'd like to hand it over to the one and only Sean Shea, our CEO of VIB.
Thanks, Kenya. Appreciate it. This is a great turnout. Happy Selling Tuesday to everybody. So, as Kenya said, I'm the president and founder of VIB, Virtual Intelligence Briefing. And so right after college, after I graduated with a degree in meteorology, if anybody doesn't know what that means I'm a weatherman by trade. I never did I never did anything with it, but I am a weatherman by education. I went into sales right after college back in the day when you had to walk into a store, a retail store, to buy a computer. So that shows you how old I am if you could not tell by looking at the bags and wrinkles on my face. So I've been in sales a long time. One of the things that I had, discovered early on is no matter where I was, whether I was just, regular SDR, BDR, account executive, VP of sales, I wanted to get more meetings, somehow create more meetings, get better leads, better interactions. And it was always surrounded by having those meetings with the right people. So I started buying lists and writing email scripts and doing phone calls. And so I created a company about 10 years ago that was like a part-time gig. Roughly 5 years ago, VIB is a full-time data and marketing services company. And the person that I'm going to introduce, Scott Channel, we go back a long, long way, right, Scott? Before there was an internet, there was still vacuum tubes that were operating computers. But I had a inflection point in my career, which was around the year 2000, where I had been VP of sales for a couple of years, and I wanted to get back into the game. I wanted to get back into selling again. So I begged the president of that company to basically fire me. Please let somebody else run sales, put me back into the field. And the multi-million-dollar book of business I had that I had developed before that, those were other sales reps, and I had to just start from scratch in a very trying time at the end of 2001. Right? It was the post Y2K bubble, if anybody remembers that, when everybody bought tons of computer equipment because we thought of the computer equipment, everything was going to fail. And it was, right after the attacks of 9/11. And if I was starting from scratch, and if I wanted to get up to the income levels I would used to, I had to change things. And one of the first guys that I connected with is Scott over here. So, being roughly 40 years old or whatever it was at the time, and starting from scratch wasn't easy, but I found Scott, and he was known for B2B appointment selling. And I was open to learning, and he taught me about scripts and the law of 7 and lots of really cool things that were instrumental to building back that business. And art and science, what we do at VIB is we help educate our community. So when we came to this topic, thought the best person to talk about B2B appointment setting is my old good friend Scott Channel. So Scott, I'll turn the mic over to you.
Great, Sean. Thanks a lot. When you and I first met was before the books that I wrote, and I was still gigging it, practicing what I preach, calling companies, hey, do you have salespeople? Do you set appointments? Do you want to make improvements? And that's how we actually met the first time, through a cold call. Then you hired me multiple times. I learned a lot. And that was when in those days when cold call really was a cold call. There wasn't the databases and all the interactions. People still picked up the phone. And the way I learned this was calling companies of at least 1,000 employees, booking meetings with the CEOs and executive VPs. So I want you to think about that. All right, that was the environment where I learned this trade. And because we're short on time, I'm going to bomb through what I believe are key principles to messaging to better have you analyze what you're doing and what you might change to. Like Sean said, he needed to shake things up. Well, I'm hoping what we do in the next 30 minutes gives you reason and direction as to how you can shake things up. So I want you to remember throughout booking appointments that your sole goal is to enable a buyer that recognizes a need to conclude that time with you is worth it, period. That is your sole goal. So if we were to break that down, what's a buyer? Well, somebody who, if they heard the right things, would purchase something within the next 3 to 15 months. They have to recognize a need. Most of the people you're speaking to, even when you have great lists, do not recognize a need, which means that no matter what you say, you're going to hear something other than yes. And what you want them to conclude is that time with you is worth it, meaning you're not trying to sell your product. You're not trying to sell your service. What you're trying to do is implant them in their mind the idea that even if they don't think they're going to buy from you, that time with you is worthwhile. You're selling the meeting. You are not selling your service at this point. You want to say only the words that buyers must hear to reach that conclusion, meaning there's no extra words, there's no watered down words, there's no hesitation, there's no apologies for calling, groveling for calling. Just focus on that interaction, saying the words that buyers must hear to reach the conclusion that they should spend some time with you. Now, this is really important. It's important to understand that many times I get, and Sean, may comment on this later, that, if only I had a script, that's all I need. But when we talk about scripting or appointment setting, your scripting or your verbiage is part of an ecosystem. And if that ecosystem is not right, a good script is not going to save you. All right. So if you're calling the wrong list, if you're working inefficiently, if you're not integrating other touch points with them, if you're not sorting, if you're more into activity mode than really working a overall system and process, then good scripts are not going to save you. And let's break down a little bit of what that ecosystem looks like. So first of all, your list. Much of what happens on the phone is decided before you even pick up the phone, meaning 50% of the reason why you book meetings is because you're calling the right people. And even when you have a good list, what you're trying to do is to sort people by priority. I always like to use an A through E scale, C being average, A being the best, B above average. D and E, we don't even want to bother with. So as you call, you sort through. 50% is your list. You have to work efficiently, meaning let's assume that you're working a great list. Well, the more efficiently that you can work through that, the more buyers you're going to bump into, who then you can deliver your magic words, who are going to go, hey, I need that. They sound great. You know what? I should at least talk to them. And what that means is having your CRM properly set up, having your outreach or sales flow probably set up, all your touch points set up so that you can work efficiently through that great list. And I'll tell you, these 2 points do not get the respect they deserve. I see over and over again, people working way too hard, calling the wrong list. They never calling C, D, and E clients mostly, with CRMs that are inefficient. They have no process to follow. They're just in activity mode. And then they wonder why they can't get results. You want to develop verbiage for all of your common scenarios. So even though every situation is different, but there's more commonalities than differences. So for all the common scenarios, you should be thinking about it, What's my best response? How do I get the business response I want most of the time? You prepare for it, you come across that scenario, you deliver it, and that's how you maximize result. You need to sort. So 50% of your results of the list, 20% is the efficiency in the system, 20% is the verbiage or your scripts, 10% is everything else. What you want to do is, I always like this analogy that you want to be a rancher, not a rustler. Meaning rustlers start every day and they run out there and they say, okay, who can we catch today? Whereas if you're a rancher, meaning if you're working a system for appointment setting, you want to be culling a herd that you created rather than every day starting with nothing and trying to find something. So you want to, as you work your process, you want to develop a herd, that pool of qualified targets that you work over time to not only get the meetings now, but you can continue with minimum effort to kick out meetings again and again in the future. And very, very important is to follow up. You know, there's a lot of missed opportunities in appointment setting. And one of them is that after people identify, if you're working a good system, you're identifying high value, high probability targets. And once identified, even if they don't have a meeting now, there's still a great quality target. And for those small percentage of people that you identify, you put all this work and effort to identify that very small percentage in these pools you work, to not have an adequate follow-up system, to not many times use marketing techniques that are not appropriate for the group, but are perfect for the top of the top, offline techniques, is really, really costing you ROI if you don't do that. So I want you to be thinking of your total system. Now, when it comes to scripting, you've got to believe in some things, okay? You can't wing it, all right? And in my book, which my opus, is I list 31 core beliefs, but I want to bump through them because I want to bomb through them for a moment, because you've got to act in accordance with your beliefs. One of the things I believe is I'm not trying to, and I would not encourage you to try to convince anyone of anything. What you do is you interact with something, you communicate what you do, the benefits, why you're credible, you let them say yes or no. You're not trying to convince them of anything. You need to engineer velocity, meaning you have to work efficiently. You know, we like to think that it's our great verbiage and our savoir-faire on the phone, our witty banner and so forth. But I'm telling you, bumping into more high probability targets is going to get you more meetings than trying to improve your witty repartee. All right. Think groups, meaning don't think of individual calls. So when I was calling, and I booked more than 2,000 meetings before I started teaching this stuff, I would encourage you not to worry about what happens on any one particular call. But what you should be worrying about is, hey, here's a common scenario. Somebody picks up the phone. I left a voicemail. Someone states an objection. I'm getting a question. If you hear this all the time, what you should be thinking about is, did I give the response? Did I deliver it the way where I get the business result I wanted most of the time? So don't worry about individual calls. Think about the response you get among similarly situated groups. Now, this hits thing. I wanted to say this really clearly, all right? That being prepared and being direct and being professional is not being salesy. And as a sales trainer, I have to tell you, I have concluded that salesy is anything that a sales rep is uncomfortable doing. So you have to focus on what works, even if it is uncomfortable for you. You have to do what works. So if you're talking to buyers, they want to know what you do, why you're credible, the benefits you deliver, and what you're asking of them. That is not being salesy. That is being professional. What's the number one reason buyers don't agree to meet with you? Very simply, you don't give them, or your reps don't give them enough reason to meet with you. You're unclear. You don't communicate your credibility. You don't hint at benefits. You don't tell them what they're going to get at a meeting if they were to invest some time. So think of your current scripts, and are you checking those boxes off or not? If not, you got to change it. You have a buyers only focus, meaning every time someone picks up the phone, assume they are a buyer, say the words that buyers don't want to hear. One of the things I see all the time, which is self-sabotage, is because remember, 80 to 85% of the people you're talking to, even with a good list, do not need what you're offering at that moment in time. All right. So no matter what you say, you're going to hear something other than yes. So what you don't want to do is overreact to something other than a yes. Always say to yourself, hey, if this person was a buyer, did I say the things they needed to hear to conclude that spending more time with me or the company I represent is worthwhile? I come from the school where value knocked down doors. So it was, you get somebody on the phone. I have no personality, so I wouldn't do the hi, how are you thing or anything like that. It'd be like, hey, Charlie, boom, calling from such and such. We do X. Companies like Bing and Bang and 1,000 others use us because they get benefits like mega benefit 1, mega benefit 2, mega benefit 3. Looking to introduce ourselves, share some of the strategies that have worked. If you think of us in the future, that'd be great. Do you have any time in the next week or two? Boom. Lay the foundation up front so that if you're speaking to somebody that recognizes a need and they're looking for a top quality provider, they can conclude, oh, maybe I should spend some time with this person. Now, do not worry about, I also get this objection a lot, that people want to feel natural. All I got to tell you, I think that's overrated, all right? Particularly up front. You know, you're trying to get a business result. You're dealing with buyers. And if you're appointment setting, you're probably offering something that people don't buy very frequently, which means that it's usually costly, or it has great impact on their business. So if you call them in a direct professional manner, lay out the cards, they're not going to say, oh, well, boy, they do what I need. They sound great. They work for all these great companies in my industry. Boy, 2,000 other companies work with them. They get the results I want to get. You know what? They just didn't sound so comfortable in that first 30 seconds. I don't think I'm going to deal with them. That's not the way it works. So that first presentation earns you additional conversation. Only 15 to 20% recognize a need. And also remember this, I think there's a lot of misinformation or the world as we want it to be in appointment setting land. And top performers, I've noticed, do not model the struggling and the mediocre. So if you're doing kind of what everyone else is doing, the best that you're going to get is be mediocre. What you want to do is you want to be like the best, not like the rest. Know the differences in terms of how they approach it. And we've already talked about 50-20. 50% is the list, 20% is your process, 20% is your verbiage, and 10% is all the rest. So before we get into the messaging, I just want to say one other thing, that when we get into the messaging, I'm going to give you little snippets of scripts, but what I'm really giving you is the concepts behind effective messaging. And then in the great handout that you're going to get, the VIB team put together, you are going to see samples of scripts, samples of emails that have worked. And so what I'm hoping is between the principles that Sean and I lay out here, and then what you see in that handout, you're going to be evaluate what you're doing and make some changes. Sean, comments on all that I've thrown up so far?
Man, I should have written down this stuff because I had a lot of good things to say. I mean, so many things resonated here right at the beginning when you're talking about, you know, the CRM, right? I think sometimes we assume that, you know, the more the merrier, you know, more and more data, or the data that I'm being handed is the right data. Just the other day, one of our SDRs had brand new, just, you know, a week or two into working for the company, set up a couple of appointments, and the bad news is that they were with targets that were never going to buy from us, right? Like, you know, not, you know, somebody made a simple mistake. You know, our business is we sell to companies that are in the B2B space. If a company is going after consumers, that's not our space. We don't help them. So, the only point was, is, sometimes slow down, be a little extra careful, and what gets uploaded in the CRM, because nobody wants to, you know, go through all the efforts of making an appointment and then, oh boy, it was with the wrong person. And then especially, and it depends on the role. Like if I just wasted my time and I wasted that person's time. If I'm an SDR or a BDR, not only did I waste my time, but then I wasted another person's time. So,
Sean, you raise a great point, and I like to say appointment setting is not about appointment setting. It's about making sales, and the appointment setting process is just part of that overall effective sales process. So lots of people can book out meetings, but if they don't convert, they're not worthwhile. So let me bomb through some of these secrets in the minutes we have left. First of all and foremost, you've got to be prepared, which means you must create a pile of words. And what I mean by that is you've got to look through your company information, your competitors' information, those that are online that rank high for SEO, for pay-per-click. And you've got to take verbiage that covers bases in terms of how are you going to refer to your name? How are you going to describe what you're going to do? How are you going to communicate credibility? Are you going to drop names? Are you going to mention the number of clients that you have, nationally, regionally, internationally? What benefits are you going to mention in these very short interludes of scripts or voicemails or LinkedIn messages or emails that hints at the benefits that you can deliver? What are they going to get at the meeting? Meaning, even if they don't buy from you now or in the future, are they going to feel, well, you know what? I can learn something at that meeting that may very well benefit for me. That 30 minutes would be worthwhile. And then you have to calculate your ask, and then you have all the miscellaneous. So I'll give you an example. So, I have a current client now, a boutique wealth management firm. And the pile of words, as you can see, we flipped through, was 12 pages. And then I added another couple of pages to it. And that's the kind of foundation that you have to lay if you can expect to write good scripts that are in a few seconds are going to grab someone's attention, get them to pause a bit longer to conclude that meeting with you is worthwhile. You've got to write it down. And I will say this to you, for the sales managers and the business owners that are listening in, if your reps are not writing down their verbiage or crafting structures for what they're going to say in these repetitive scenarios, they are literally ripping up your dollars and throwing them out the window. There is no way that without preparation, and all creating a pile of words and write it down is preparation. I don't care whether you're a scripting person or not a scripting person, but everybody should be prepared. And if you don't write down the verbiage and sort through it and make the best choices to cover those bases, you're really booking meetings more on randomness than because of anything strategically or specific that you're doing. So you've got to absolutely write it down. All these common interactions, I just want to hit on one thing. We've covered salesy, but this idea of that you want to build rapport. Rapport is earned after you communicate credibility and value. So rapport is not this, hey, what are you doing? We're getting along, how the Cubs doing, or whatever else. Rapport is something that earns you a conversation after you communicate credibility and value. And you've got to write down verbiage for all these common scenarios that are listed here in the screen. And very, very importantly, we're going to cover this at the end, what you say when they say no and they know again. The most valuable thing that I'm going to share with you is the answer to that question, which we're going to get to in just a couple of minutes. You've got to embrace the no. One of the reasons why people don't get best results is they actually do backflips to try to avoid getting the no, and realize that no is the second best answer you can get. And if you're not actually encouraging no's, if you're not acknowledging that, hey, we may be a fit, we may not be a fit, timing might be right, timing may not be right, you are weakening yourself and you're kind of seeming needy or desperate. Keep in mind that no often means not now. And if the goal is to have better conversations, when you're open to a no, when the person you're speaking to recognizes that no is okay, that leads to having a better conversation. And you're better off to get a solid no now than to keep following up on people who are never going to buy simply because you avoided the word no. Those who are successful understand that they may interact with a qualified target who's not ready to meet now, but they're willing to delay their gratification for a meeting in 3 months or 6 months that leads to a sale. If you're not willing to embrace the no, what you end up doing is foreclosing the possibility that you might be able to work with someone in the future because you say things to wreck it. So you lose credibility when there is not a no. There's 3 common objections, and due to time, I'm not going to go over them, but you don't need to have responses to 20 different objections. They all come down to we're all set, call me back, and send some info. Everything is a variation of those objections. Messaging secret number 5. Don't make it easy for them to lump you in with the idiots. And what I mean by that is, let's face it, you work in a certain environment. People get a lot of calls. A lot of people who interact with them don't do it so great. So if you're going to look like and sound like all the people who have wasted their time in the past, they're going to lump you in with all those people. And no matter what you have to say or how good you are or how good your company is, they're not going to give you due. Realize that if your competition can say it, you do not want to say it. So you're trying to communicate value, but you're also trying to communicate not only a differentiation for your company, but a differentiation in terms of how you present yourself on the phone, meaning you do not want to say things or phrase things the way they commonly hear when people call them up. So act differently. And, write it down before we turn it back to Sean. I just want to say that, you can't take a script off a shelf and just use it to fit your company. A script is specific to you, and it starts with writing it down. And as you use the script, you make constant marginal improvements in order to get more oomph based on how you react. I'm a strong believer, not only in writing it down, but particularly for new BDRs, having a cheat sheet where all their core language, what they have thought about, what they have decided is the best approach, is actually written down. Doesn't mean they have to read it, doesn't mean they have to refer to it, but just the exercise of coming to a conclusion in these few seconds that I have, what's the best words that I can use so I can stick to that plan? And you would be doing yourself a major favor, and you would be your best teacher if you were to record yourself, no law against recording your end of a conversation, and practice it, because then you're going to hear all your ums and your ahs, and you're going to hear, hey, I spent all this time writing what I think is a great script. Why did I vary from it, add extra words, skip spots? And you will be your best teacher. So Sean, again, thrown a lot on the table here. Your comments.
A lot of great information, especially with some of those objections. Send me some information. I like to ask the person, not exactly like, send me information on what, but specifically, right? And based on, and I'm not going to ask it in a combative way. That makes perfect sense. We have a lot of information. What specifically can we help you? I want to make sure I send you the right information. You can kind of tell from there is, because sometimes people, I got them at the wrong time. They really might want to have information. Probably 90% of the time, they really just want to blow you off and get you off the phone. But based on the response, you could tell. And one of the things that Scott was saying is that sometimes I think is overlooked is, and Scott, when I go back to you, I want to make sure we tell everybody the name of your book again. It's very important. Put it up on the screen.
The meeting.
Is having the right mindset when calling. What I mean by that is, not to be overly salesy, not to put too much pressure on yourself. I remember so many times where bosses would say, we have the best thing since sliced bread. All you have to do is call, and they're going to be so excited that you get somebody on the phone and they're going to say, yeah, book a meeting. That's pretty crazy and pretty arrogant. And if you're the sales rep thinking every person that you call is going to say yes when they say no, you start to get paranoid and like, oh my God, what am I doing wrong? And so I like to diffuse the pressure on myself, because if I have low expectations, right? Because really, most of the people we call, we're going to call them at the wrong time.
True.
Or even if they're right buyer, all those things, right? Are they busy? Do they have budget? All those kinds of things. And there's a great possibility that they really don't need what we want. So they're going to say no. And if I go into the calling process thinking everybody's going to say yes, that's not going to work out. So now I go into the calling process knowing that most people are going to say no. And so when they say no, it's perfectly okay. And I go on to the next call. But if I go into the call thinking that everybody's going to say yes, every no that I hear makes me more and more tense. I got to the point once where, and this is awful to admit, but probably a lot of people on this call could associate this, is that I was scared to make calls. I'd have a dialer and the person would pick up. I'd hang up.
Right.
Now that's not a good strategy of success, is that when the person hangs up, I'm too scared to talk and I hang up on them. But, when I started to develop the mindset is that, like what Scott was saying, we may or may not be a fit. And that's perfectly okay. And explain, this is what we do. This is the problem that we solve for our customers. Give them a couple of reasons why, that I diffuse the pressure on me, I would diffuse the pressure on them. And that way the odds actually improved. And if they said no, okay, that's fine. On to the next one. And that's about, one thing that, came away, take away after listening to you.
And, if you do that, then they're more comfortable having an actual conversation with you. So you find out more. And I want to go back to a couple of points that you made about, when people say, send me some information, we know that 90% of the blow off. And I think it's a great example, Sean, of where working a real plan and having a strategy with all these scenarios save you time and bump up your results. So to your point, 90% of the people who say send me information are just blowing you off, but it means that 10% are not, and they have a legitimate need. So you got them on the phone now. So your structure of how to respond is perfect, because if someone's real, they're going to tell you what information would be generally helpful to them, and you can continue to interact with them. If they don't, it's perfectly okay to say, hey, it doesn't sound like it's mutually beneficial, for us to interact in the short term, but, why don't we stay in touch? Boom. You do not have to just keep calling back and calling back. In fact, you got to step up to the plate and have some backbone, and be willing to say no, or otherwise you're going to get stuck in maybe land, wasting phenomenal amounts of time. Sean, I've just got a couple more slides before we get to Q&A. Can I bomb through those and then turn it over to you? So probably the most valuable thing you're going to learn in the next 30 seconds. You're working a process, you're calling a great list, you're interacting with people, you're professional, you're prepared. You get somebody on the phone and in a very professional, direct manner, who you are, where you're calling from, why you're credible, the benefits you deliver, You want to share those strategies. Do they have time to meet in the next week or two? They hit you with an objection. You give a carefully, very professional, prepared response. They say no again. And then you got to say this. Now, this was my style. It may not be yours. I'd say, hey, no big deal. Hey, don't want to be on your back, but obviously we do an awful lot of this. Could you suggest the time I should be back in touch?
Mhm.
You do the hardest thing in the world for a salesperson to do. Shut up. Let them respond. Of those that give you a date, those who say to you, actually, you know what? Why don't you give me a call back in 3 months? Give me a call back in 6 months. 50% of those will book a meeting on a callback. It's the closest you ever get to a layup in appointment setting, all because you had the guts and the backbone after people said no twice to ask that, add that simple sentence. Don't want to be in your back. Obviously, we do a lot of this. Could you suggest a time we should be back in touch? So whatever your closing percentage is from those callbacks, do the math. But if you don't add that sentence at the end of what you're doing, you're just tossing money away. So in summary, just want to say, do not add unnecessary words. People are less likely to book a meeting for you if you ask questions, which gets them off track. If you try to qualify him before laying the foundation, hey, if you sound hesitant or unsure, you add filler words. If you're not confident about what you're saying, why should they be confident about meeting with you? If you apologize for the interruption, why don't you just say to them, hey, I'm not worth your time right up front. Don't apologize. You have good information. You help people. You have a great option. Do never apologize for interrupting them. Never go off. You prepared script path. And remember, you've got to cover all the bases for a buyer to conclude that time with you is worth it, even if they do not end up hiring you. And you build your foundation for that with a good script, which is based upon solid messaging, adequately prepared. So Sean, that's it. Boy, we covered a lot of things. Over to you.
Good. So we're gonna open it up to Q&A in a couple of minutes. And thank you, Scott, that was terrific. I'm just going to talk for 1 minute about VIB, and just let people know what we do in case there may be a fit to connect with us and learn more. Is we solve a couple of the major problems that people in marketing and sales deal with these days from the digital side of things. One is having the right data. We have 15 million B2B data records. So we help our customers get in touch with the right people. So our customers might come to us and they might say, our customer is cybersecurity professionals in the United States. And we could say, oh, we have 100,000 cybersecurity professionals in our database. So no need to worry about the data. We have the data. The other part, through lots of trial and error, we've mastered the art and science of actually getting the email into the inbox. That's another, challenge number 2, because, these these gateways and all these sophisticated, softwares, trying every way that they could to block your email to get into the inbox. So, if somebody has a compelling message and they have the right data and the email gets into the inbox, there's a real fighting chance. And we actually also have an appointment setting service for our B2B clients, where we'll go out through, using emails and get people that have the pain points that our customers address and set up qualified meetings with the right people. And like Scott said, we don't call on the phone, and we don't ask, bant questions on an initial call, because just think about how silly that is. A stranger picks up the call and some stranger is asking somebody, hey, are you the, do you have authority to buy this? And how many days it like, I don't even know who you are. Why would I answer those questions? So we help people in the B2B space. And, if anybody is in the B2B area and needs help with more webinar registrations or qualified meetings, we might be able to help you out. And that's what we do. And I think it's Q&A time, Scott, for the last couple of minutes. And so lots of salespeople here, more than 300 salespeople on the call. It's very exciting. If you have a question, please go to the Q&A and send it over. And yes, the webinar will, the recording, everybody will get a link to watch the recording. And what other great gifts, Scott, are you going to send to people?
Your team put together a great handout
Yep.
that they're going to get after this with sort of a rating system to self-diagnose their program and some script samples, both for phone scripts and email scripts, that hopefully with the points we covered will get people thinking about their approach, be able to identify the weaker points that they could then punch up.
Okay, great. What I'd like to ask, if maybe if you have any Q&A during the last couple of minutes, please pop it into the Q&A. While we have these couple of minutes, I'd love to just kind of hear, and if you don't, in the chat window, what is your main obstacle in doing what Scott was just talking about? What's the main obstacle in setting appointments today? Right? There's lots of them that Scott talked about, having the right records, script, all kinds of things. So I wonder what people are faced with. Main obstacle, finding the right decision maker.
On that point, Sean, in the old days, before the databases, that would be part of the call process. Now, I think that in large part, that step has almost been eliminated between LinkedIn and the quality of the databases. I think in a very high percentage of the time, you're able to identify somebody within a company that, if not the decision maker, is pretty darn close to it. And that's one of the ways that data has improved, and particularly one of the things that your company does.
Oh, there's one of the topics that is coming up in the chat is about no, when people are saying no. Being confident, well, first of all, I think we should be confident it's okay to get a no. There was a question here, responding after listening and saying no twice. And I'm interpreting that if the person is saying no, I mean, one thing that I would like, is, well, how would you respond to that?
Yeah. So first of all, when you're saying no, if you lay your cards on the table clearly and directly in terms of what you do, and if somebody says no, being willing to let them go. Now, big picture, I'm not saying as soon as they say no, you don't try to talk to them a little bit more. But my rule of thumb was, look, if I laid a pitch and then somebody said no, which I consider to be send me some information, call me back, or one of the typical blow-offs, I give it one shot to repeat the what we do, the credibility, the benefit. Hey, is that worth 30 minutes of your time? And if they still said no, then I'd do the, hey, look, I don't want to be on your back. Obviously, we do a lot of this. Could you suggest a time we're back and I should be back in touch? Boom. So I would give it that much time. But if you don't put that on the table, the biggest pushback I get from all my training is I always put in my pitches something like, hey, we may not be a fit, or think of us in the future. And usually for the newbies, they say, no, I don't want to say that. I don't want to say that at all. Because they just refuse to acknowledge that if you don't put out there that no is an acceptable answer, people clam up. So as you mentioned, Sean, in some of the samples you gave us, if you put out there, we may not be a fit, hey, timing may not be right. Hope you think of us in the future. You're acknowledging that no's a possibility and that we might meet, we might talk, we might even meet, and we may not be a fit, and that's okay.
Well, Scott, one of the other items that I think we deal with, even having the best data, and a lot of the data out there, I mean, not all of it, but a lot of the data subscription services is pulling from LinkedIn, right? Now, actually, LinkedIn is not always accurate in terms of what the title is, because, I mean, if you're, a social influencer, you're an influencer, or you're looking for a new job, you're always updating, your latest and greatest title. Somebody could be in this category and get moved to a different category. They didn't update their profile. So the reason why I think that's important is sometimes we assume that, ooh, look at this person has the right title. They actually accepted a meeting for us. And then when I'm in the first meeting, I usually like to, before, I don't want to launch into any kind of commercial, is to ask them, would you share with me a little bit about, your day-to-day, like, what are you involved in and what are some of the challenges? And sometimes right off the bat, oh boy, this person is involved in an area that is not what the LinkedIn profile says, and it's clearly the wrong person. So, if I find that out early in the discovery call, we could, I'm not going to go through my pitch. The person's not going to have to do the awkward no. We could just kind of reiterate, this is who we work with. It doesn't seem like you're directly involved. And then, go from there is that, if you're not directly involved in this, and then, ask if it would be appropriate to, who might be involved. You see a possible fit. Can you connect me with the right person? But, to not always assume that that is the right person because a lot of times data is not correct.
That's right. My rule of thumb, I don't know about your thoughts, but my rule of thumb is compiled data is about 85% correct, and that we have to work probability. So one of my core beliefs is work in the high probability zone, not the low probability zone. So, don't work from, well, maybe possibly this isn't correct. Say, well, most of it is correct. And let me work a process where even if I'm not hitting the right person, I'm going to be as close as possible. And if I do a good job of communicating what I do, credibility, value, I'm going to probably get referred. I've earned them saying to me, hey, why don't you call so-and-so? They're a better fit. So we always want to do is focus on how we're doing overall with certain groups and not overreact to any one particular meeting. So we got to keep stats on our success rates overall and keep trying to improve those. Do not overreact to the ones that don't fit or the lunatic fringe.
Yeah. Couple of Q&As here. One from Steven. What do you mean by groups?
Great. So a group would be a group that looks just like your best buyers. So if you were to make a list of your great clients, and you would want to work a group that looks just like them. So you would go to a database, which is typically 85% correct, look them up, and then use SIC, NAICS codes, revenue ranges, size of companies as other criteria, so that you could call a group of records that looks just like your current great clients that you want to clone. Or if you use some of the examples, I call them common scenarios, Sean. So a group might be all the people that you leave a voicemail for, or all the people that pick up the phone and say hello. So you think of groups of records by priority, and then also think of common scenarios by groups. So for all certain questions you get, or leaving a voicemail, whatever it is, that your behavior, the words you choose to say, are the best that they could be to get the best response from that group and not necessarily each individual record. I never cared about what one person said on the phone. I did care a lot about whether I was doing the right thing to get the best results overall among a similarly situated group.
Good point. There's a good point. One question here, Plumie Williams, a number of my sales agents stutter when talking to clients. How would you advise to help them to be more bold or confident? And I have this little, saying, preparation develops confidence and confidence develops courage. What does that mean? I think that the callers, your agents or your salespeople, they'll be more confident. They'll be less afraid with good preparation, good training from management.
Yeah.
And a lot of times it's just like letting that person know, the SDR, BDR, is it's okay to be nervous, because we're all nervous at the beginning.
Part of learning. Yeah.
It's okay when the person says no. That's good. Get some more no's, you're going to get a yes. But and practice. We just had a company meeting about a month ago, and I had a 5-minute little speech to make, and I practiced that 5 minutes with just about anybody that would talk to me. They didn't even understand what the heck I was saying, because it was relevant to the group. But just by saying it to my 20-year-old daughter, I could imagine how her eyes were rolling. But she listened, and just by doing it and saying it and practicing, when I got up there, I have a lot more confidence. There's a couple other good ones here. From Brian Fowler, how much is too much when talking, emailing someone? Less is more, or is it always good to give all away the relevant information?
Yeah.
How do you know?
Yeah, I cringe when I hear people say, just shorten it, because something has to be whatever length it needs to be to accomplish the business result you seek. So the fact, if you're speaking to a buyer and you have a lot of great things to say, it can be longer than most, and buyers want to get that stuff. All right, they want to hear those things. And I think that's one of the mistakes that people make, is they don't distinguish between the people who interact with, who are the buyers, and then the people who are the non-buyers. So I never went by length. In fact, some of the most successful things I've seen, most would consider to be too long, but because the messaging was right on point with what buyers wanted to hear, it was very, very successful. So concentrate on what you're communicating. Are you covering all the bases? Always, if you can be more succinct and clearer, always want to do that. And obviously, if there's unnecessary words in something which makes it long unnecessarily, you want to get rid of that. But focus more on communicating what the buyers need to hear to conclude that you're worth additional time.
Yeah. We're getting close to Kenya coming in here and
with the big hook.
the hook is coming. The hook is coming. Sean has a question here. This might be a little bit, we have at least 6 personas we could target, each having a nuance. As far as the messaging.
Yeah.
Can cause messaging headaches. Any thoughts?
So Sean, when people do the preparation and they have their core scripting, which is the most common scenario, then there are going to be variations by industry, or by size of company, by what side of the street they're on, whatever. But it's important, if you do the preparation, that you have the core, and then just modify them for the nuances, as our questioner says, when they come up. So people are working on a core, they prepare it, they can deliver it, and then whatever changes that need to be made, are made in those cases. But all good scripts will have nuances because you will make minor changes based upon industry, company size, what you know about the company. But the core, on a good scripting, the core is going to remain pretty much the same.
I think we have time for maybe one more question. I know, guys.
No, it's easy as salespeople get going with other salespeople, you know.
No, Sean, I just want to point out maybe that some, both you and I, how much of what we've said happens before the phone in terms of databases, in terms of preparation, working efficiently. And all of those things matter more to the result you get than the words you choose to say. And then I'll just say that, in my practice, I see some companies that do a lot of appointment setting. With others, it's a bit more strategic. So this is not about, oh, this is the best technique, but if appointment setting has a place in your overall plan, you want to do it well. And hopefully the last hour has helped you, and what the handout you're going to get has helped you define where you need to focus to improve your results.
Great. And I in the chat window, I put my LinkedIn and I put my email address in there. So, because, a couple of these questions that came in, would be happy to answer them.
Sure.
Purely, salesperson helping other salesperson. So if anybody, has a question that wasn't covered, please zap me an email at sean@virtualintelligencebriefing.com.
And same for me, Scott@scottchannel.com, 2 T's, 2 N's, and 2 L's, and we'd be happy to answer.
Perfect. Thank you. Kenya, thank you for organizing this terrific event.
Hey, of course, guys. It was awesome to hear you guys talking about it. And thank you, everyone, for joining the webinar today. We are so happy to have all of you at a great turnout. Please be on the lookout for an email after the webinar. We'll provide the checklist that Scott had mentioned before with a few script examples. And hopefully that can help you with your messaging skills. And we'll also be sending out a recording of today's webinar along with the checklist. So you guys will be able to look back and be able to play this as many times as you want. I will also add the link to Scott's author page as well as their contact information. So if you guys have any other questions, you can ask them too. With that, I'm going to go ahead and close the webinar. So feel free to reach out with any questions you have. And thanks again for attending. And thank you, Scott and Sean, for your time.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. All right. Thanks
Have a great day, everyone. Bye.
Bye.